The purpose of the Ag Ed fifth quarter grant set forth by the legislature is to develop and assist local schools and career centers supplemental resources to ensure the delivery of summer instruction and to develop student entrepreneurial activities and work experiences through their supervised agriculture experience. You're going to start to hear the term work-based learning a lot, and work-based learning and SAE go hand in hand. And so you may hear us refer to work-based learning, or you may hear administrators refer to work-based learning. You can just reflect on that as being SAEs that we have in the agriculture and environmental systems career field. The funds that are provided are to be used to provide additional revenue streams to local education agencies to assist them in providing a fifth quarter of instruction or the goal of year-round instruction for the purpose of data collection and validating students' experiences, incomes, efficiency factors related to supervised agriculture experiences. So the big takeaway here is that this grant is only for SAEs. And we talk about that in the terms of SAE visits and SAE management. So when we talk about this grant and the purpose of the grant, this is what's laid for us for law. And so this does not necessarily reflect on extended programming in its entirety, only a portion of the three-circle model. So before we really set forth today, we want to kind of address one of the things that a lot of you are probably asking yourself about is what are we going to do currently with the current school building closure that is still in effect through June 30th. On the department website under our COVID-19 page, we have a pretty extensive FAQ that addresses a lot of these topics. And so the guidance here on the screen is directly from that FAQ on what our response would be to an inquiry about how do we or what can we do with work-based learning going forward. So the highlights from this, I'm not going to read it all, but the highlights would be that this is a local decision. So you are going to need to work with your local administrators. Potentially, they may want to reach out to the local Board of Health to identify what the best practice is going to be for delivering work-based learning during this time period, and even after the end of the school building closure here at the end of June. We don't know if that would be extended or not, but we do know that this is going to be up to local decision makers on how to best appropriately address these student experiences. So one of the things that we have looked at is that, we want to continue to provide these key components of our programs. And so work-based learning is and should be taking place, but how it's taking place may look different than what it's looked before. So today on the call with us, we have Tracy Denninger, who you all hopefully know. She is our SAE specialist guru with AET. And so we asked her to be on the call today to just provide some updates on best practices due to COVID-19 and just best practices in general to be thinking about over the next 30 days as you close out the FY20 fiscal year and as you start into the FY21 grant year for SAE visit supervision. So Tracy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of my wheelhouse of AET as you guys kind of navigate through what looks a little bit different in what we commonly know as our SAE visits this year. And like Ryan said, I think a lot of this, even though we know how to begin and handle those SAE visits in a normal year, I think it's extremely important that you continue to have open lines of communication with your administration on what is their guidelines and realm for you to work in to continue your SAE visits. And obviously, I think we all know those are probably going to look different. They're going to feel different. They're just going to be different. But I think the positivity that comes out of that is we may be able to have, I think, more in-depth conversation with these students in a personal setting than what we would do on a site visit of just some relaxed conversation of how things are going. And so I think this way is going to force us into a cubicle that may be a little uncomfortable as we really use the tools and access we have to the student records comparatively to what is going on in the student SAE. So I think everybody is becoming more and more familiar with Zoom or some sort of virtual platform to connect with students. If obviously your administration says no face-to-face communication with students based on whatever their guidance is, I think you're going to be forced into that world to kind of do a virtual visit with these students. I probably would prioritize these because obviously this could take significant more time than normal. So I think you prioritize with those who may have an exhibition project that may need more guidance versus a project that is not for exhibition. But also then I think you can also utilize in AET, which we'll talk about, you can utilize the employer function in reviewing student record and progress as well, which may help curve the number of actual SAE visits that you would do, giving some of that review and critique and feedback from the employer who's actually supervising the student. I think if you're going to use the Zoom platform, you need to review the records prior to that visit and take some notes as to what your expectations are for the student to complete in the actual records. You can also use the single SAE report that will create that document for you to evaluate what things may or may not be appearing in the student records, and obviously make notes for those to have those in discussion with the student. You can also use the visit manager in AET to begin capturing those comments that will be sent to the student and the parent that you may want them to look at before or prior to the visit. The insert link for review records doc, if Ryan could remember which Tuesday newsletter from Brenda, there was one in there that had a review of records before awards that was pretty comprehensive of things to look for and from an evaluation standpoint to see if all of the components are present in a student's record and that it makes sense. We can put that back in there, but it was a pretty comprehensive document that I did that should help you sort through some of the key components to students' records. If the students are not already using the mobile device feature of the AET, I think that is a key component to giving them almost instant access to their records without having to go to a computer. Basically, this is not an app. It basically is a method of making the AET part of their home screen on their mobile device. And simply you would visit m.theaet.com and it basically asks the student to add that to their home screen, however iPhone or Android captures that. And then in a sense, it basically gives them immediate access to those records to add cash expenses or non-cash expenses or journal activities. And sometimes you guys know as well as we all do that when students have instant access, it definitely improves the capturing of the essence of what's going on in that period of time, rather than encouraging those kids to write that down on paper and then bringing it back into school in the fall and going back in and updating those records. I think if we can get students to become motivated to capture those things when they immediately happen, I think ultimately it can contribute to a higher quality set of records with less work on your part as the educator to review those and try to get them up to date later in the fall when everything else seems to be of more urgency than sometimes catching up those records. Next slide, Ryan. So when conducting those virtual remote visits, again, I think you need to do your homework and share those records of concern with the student at the time of that virtual remote visit. And I think you as the educator need to have in mind, what is your expectation for student record keeping? And once you identify what your expectation is, that you have an accountability system in place for monitoring how those students are completing the expectations of record keeping. In the actual virtual visit, you need to ask those SAE questions that are specifically related and pertinent to the SAE, especially if it's not found in the records. For example, is your fair pigs eating any feed? And the kid is obviously going to tell you, while yes, well, I don't see any feed records in your SAE. You know, and things that are related to that is asking the student, you know, how many pounds of feed is this pig eating per day, or how are you feeding per day? What are your weekly weights? Again, you're just trying to monitor the progression of the SAE and develop the student's skill set by pushing their level of accuracy and completeness and involvement in the SAE project itself. Maybe that student is on a job placement. You can ask, how many days are you working per week? How many hours are you working a day? What are the things that you like learning on the job? What are the things that are challenging you in the job? And I think you then, as the educator, can capture those notes in your SAE manager to help you also monitor the growth of that student in the actual work-based learning experiences that they are recording. I also, in that last bullet point, encourage you to record relatable recommendations on an SAE visit manager. Oftentimes when I get asked about what these teacher journals look like or what these SAE visit managers, sometimes they are extremely vague. And for me, that makes me uncomfortable from a reporting standpoint and a quality standpoint in the actual development of a student's SAE. In that, you know, just saying everything looks good, good luck at the fair. I'm not really comfortable with that, in that if that pig does not make weight at the fair, or if that student gets fired from a job site and your comments or recommendations in the SAE visit manager are pretty vague, you know, you're probably going to have a disgruntled parent that's going to call and ask, you saw this pig, you visited with my student or with my son or daughter, you didn't make any recommendations that this pig wasn't going to make weight. You got feedback from the employer that the student wasn't showing up on time or wasn't doing what was expected on the job site. How comes you didn't tell me they were going to get fired or whatever? I think it's just basically a principle that the more information you can put in those recommendations on the visit manager, the more you have yourself covered as the educator if something falls through. I know there was a teacher that uses the voice to text option, and just basically when they're moving from place to place on the actual live visits is basically recording what they saw at the student's house on the visit. And it kind of really increased the time that it took to record what was in those visits. But again, I just encourage you to be very, very pertinent, very, very accurate, and very comprehensive in what you write in your recommendations on the SAE visit manager to not only help yourself but to also give your administration the confidence that you're doing what needs to be done on SAE, and also the student and their parents or employers that the proper feedback and guidance is present in the SAE. Ryan? So in the process, you guys have known, we talked about this when we get through state awards and whatnot, just basically some things that you're checking for, and I call them just basically the 5-finger discount of remembering what goes in records. And you basically use your fingers to kind of help guide the 5 things you're looking for in records. You know, if it's an animal or a plant project, did they buy something to resell? You know, in terms of an animal, if it's a crop project, obviously a seed. If it's a business, they've bought some purchase for resale that they're going to do in the business, or they bought some supplies. If they fed the project, if they bedded the project, if they managed the project, and did they sell the project? And I've actually added the business one there to help you guys guide when you're checking these records in the student record system, that you at least have an idea of some things that you're looking for to make sure, or have a discussion with the student as to why they are not there, or how they relate to the actual SAE. So, you know, the sale of that project, I think, and it didn't change on there, but depending on how that method is of sale at a junior fair livestock show, if the kid gets an all-encompassing premium check plus their stock charge check in one check, that's a cash sale. If they get a stockyards check plus a premium sale check, and they get that in 2 checks, when you punch that in as a cash sale in the stockyards check, it removes that animal from the market manager and marks it as sold. And then the premium sale, which is just literally a cash premium to the student, you can mark as an award and premium. AET will not allow you to sell an animal twice in the system. And if you got 2 animals in there and you put a stockyards check in, and then you put a premium, you use another cash sale for the other one for your premium, it will sell the second animal. And then when you go to sell the second animal, you don't have anything left because it's the animals are grayed out. And that we've seen that in the hens, when you got a hen project in a business and you have hens that you might be reselling when they have molted or whatnot, and you're running cash sale for eggs. Well, in a business, the eggs are actually your cash product, and so the eggs should be marked as a cash sale. And if you sell the hens for processing, then the hens would be marked as other in those sales. That's just kind of a little bit of a best practice on that, because it just won't allow you to sell 2 things. Next, Ryan. On a job placement, some things to consider when you're talking about paid versus unpaid. Obviously, those are set up as separate SAE entities. In a paid SAE, again, what is your expectation and what is your accountability measure for students recording and capturing their journal entries? Obviously, you want this to be done regularly. The skills should be narratively be reflected in terms of, you know, yes, they fed animals, but, you know, instead of just saying fed show animals, you know, maybe a better description of that is that, you know, individually fed, you know, 4 show pigs, weighed and measured based on, you know, 3% consumption of their body weight, or, you know, I got 1 heavy one, I got 1 light one, I'm adding these additives to really reflect on why the nutrition of the pig is done that way, instead of just fed pigs. And again, it goes back to what your accountability preference is. Are you going to make those kids do a daily, a weekly, or a monthly entry of their journals for that experience? Or obviously those journals are impactful as well in an entrepreneurship experience too, as we talk about moving to rolling those into 12-point industry credentials. Paychecks entered timely includes hours, gross, dollars, taxes. Memo indicates a pay period. The memo is not a journal. Again, those journals obviously need to be within 10% of the hours in the paycheck. Ryan, next slide. In unpaid, obviously, there is no paycheck. So what comes to an award application and what is captured in the records simply is the number of hours that the student worked and the skills that were performed by the student in the SAE. I don't know if some of you know this, but AET now has allowed a student to select multiple skills from our career field standards into those journals. So if a kid was actively involved in multiple skills that day on the job or in the entrepreneur SAE, it will allow them to reflect on multiple skills performed that day, which is obviously a thing you guys have been asking for, and now we have it. So I really like the ability to do that. And again, as the paid SAE, you want to make sure that your accountability system matches and how you want the students to capture their daily, weekly, or monthly journals of those activities. Next. All right, so some of the teacher tools that you're going to work specifically with on the side of fifth quarter grants and how you're spending those times are actually reflected in the teacher activities. T1, which is your teacher journals, T2, which is the visit manager, and T3, which is the employer supervisor manager. T1 is simply your teacher journal, and you and Ryan can talk a little bit about this more as well, but you'll need to capture your role in SAE management, SAE visits, or school farm activity that is specifically designed in monitoring individual student SAEs at the school farm or actual school farm activity that serves as an SAE in terms of a school type land lab in which students are actively working. If you're just simply the teacher and you're out there planting corn, that's not a school farm activity in terms of SAE development. Sure, you are developing your own SAE, but it's not really what we would call student-driven SAE activity. And so those types of things would not count. Information to include in T2 and the visit manager, we talked a little bit about that now, but this thing continues to evolve, which I love it. I wish I had this tool accessible to me when I was in the classroom, because I think it really makes things a lot easier. As the kids have skills identified in their journals, it will allow you to evaluate their skills as proficient in 4 levels of proficient. You can make recommendations for the management of their SAEs. You can upload photos. I think this is a big one that we all struggle with come February when we're scrambling for quality photos. This might be a great year to increase your photo banks for students. And then come February when there's snow on the ground, you're not trying to recreate a photo. And also you can email the student and the parent as to what occurred in the actual visit. And the SAE visit is automatically entered into your teacher visit or your teacher record in your teacher journals on there as well. So I like that. It's automatically, you don't have to worry about add to teacher journal. It just goes there automatically, which I certainly appreciate that. That's one less step. The employer supervisor manager, this is relatively new. I know there are some of you guys that are using this. I played around with it a little bit yesterday. I had to call Vanessa because my evaluations of a student weren't showing up for me, the teacher, to look at what the employer evaluated the student on, and I had not heard back from her yet. But again, it allows the employer to evaluate the skills that the student has identified in their journals. I think this one could be a really cool work-based learning tool for those of you guys that are going to have students out on placement and apprenticeships or those kind of experiences where you have an employer or a supervisor that can evaluate. I mean, that's just real world work kind of environment that the kids can kind of adjust to in terms of feedback from employers and supervisors. So I really like that one. And it is in your chapter accounts right now, T3 on teacher activities. So I definitely would encourage you to open that up and see what's there and see what kind of students you have that are currently employed that you would love to collaborate with the employer. Basically, you identify the student, you identify the employer, and send an email to the employer asking them. AET will send a email to that employer asking them to provide feedback on a particular student employed in their business, and it gives them their records, and then it gives them the ability to 0 through 4 reflect on their skill ability in the workplace. Ryan?
So thank you, Tracy, for those best practices and ideas and refreshers. At this time, we'll take a brief pause. If there's any questions for Tracy related to best practices around SAE visits that are currently taking place and or will be shortly taking place.
Tracy, on the journal entries, it's okay to have kids do monthly?
Again, it's what do you want to monitor as the educator? You know, if the kid gets a paycheck every 2 weeks and has to enter the paycheck, does it make sense to wait to do monthly entries on that? Probably not. You know, I would encourage them to maybe catch up their journals, you know, every time they have to enter a paycheck. But again, when they don't do that, what happens to the quality of what they remember? I mean, we are not going to monitor to you guys, or we are not going to dictate to you guys how you want students to capture journal entries. What becomes more important is that your accountability system of holding the kids accountable matches the realm in which you're able to work and monitor and provide feedback for those students. I think if your expectation is for them to journal at least 3 times a week, then it's your job as the educator to go in and every 9 weeks or every week on AET Fridays or whatever you guys do to manage the system, that accountability system for kids who do not complete that, there is some accountability there. I'm only asking you guys to accurately capture records in a timely manner. It's no secret that when they actually go in and do a journal and they backdate, you know, 3 weeks, you got a backdating of 3 weeks. So my question is like, is the student reflection accurate at that time by backdating it 3 weeks? Probably not. It's probably not as accurate as if it were done, you know, fresh within a couple of days of the actual activity. But again, I'm not going to dictate that. I just think you have to keep and be mindful of, you know, what creates quality records on behalf of the student, to not only submit for work-based learning, but to also help the student develop their skills necessary in real-world environments of keeping records. So that's my recommendation to you. That's why I think if you guys can get kids to use the mobile app, I think there's a little bit more tendency for them to pay attention to those things on a regular basis than if they knew they had to go back to the house to get on the computer to put those records in. Good question.
Any other questions for Tracy? She'll be on with us and we can ask more towards the end if they come up, but just wanted to take a brief pause as we transition to the next topic. Okay. So let's talk about the grant utilization summary report. You will receive by email this Friday the FY20 grant utilization summary report that is due, and that your FY21 application requires you to submit. So in order for you to submit a new application, this form will need to be completed and submitted to me by email. So want to just briefly run through the expectations or the deliverables in that summary report. We continue to get better information each year from everybody, and are seeing a lot of growth in our teachers and our students across the state, from districts and teachers that are utilizing the grant. So the first item you're going to report to us is the list of the names of all teachers that receive funds from the grant. There is a tendency for people to come and go prior to the grant being fully utilized, and so we just want to make sure that we have all the named parties who receive funds in the summary. The second part is to identify the district that received the funds for those teachers, and so this could be a local district, satellite program, a joint vocational school district, or a STEM school. And so again, if this is a joint vocational district with a satellite program, each of those can be rolled up into one, or they can be returned as separate summary reports. So satellite programs, your districts, joint vocational districts can roll up your program into their overall app summary report, or they can return a individual summary report. That is a local decision, and we're able to handle both of those. Item 3, we would like you to add all extended programming days that were eligible or there in contract and for those teachers listed in item 1. So we're looking at not only the grant days, but any additional days. So if you are providing 30 days extended programming and you're on the grant and the grant gave you 14 extra days, then that would be 44 days that we would like you to report. We get asked a lot from districts, especially new programs, what is the state average of extended programming? We do not have real good data on that, and so our goal through this program is to at least say, well, based on the recipients of the Ag Ed fifth quarter grant, here is in general the number of days that we have. And so we're just continuously trying to build that ability to answer that question. It also helps us when we look at the number of programs we have around the state and what the average program is looking at from an extended programming aspect within the three-circle model for career technical education. So item 4 is asking you to reflect on a yes-no comparison to the previous year. So as you calculate those dates for FY20, we would encourage you to look at FY19. I know the slide says 18 there. I need to update that. My apologies. But we want you to reflect on FY19, and did the district, because of the grant, be able to offer more extended programming days. And so this is, again, just information that we're trying to access so that we can help make better decisions when it comes to the three-circle model and our support of it, especially when we look at supervised ag experiences or work-based learning. Item 5, you're going to calculate the total number of students that were enrolled in courses for agriculture education at each of the local education agencies that are within the report. So again, if this is a satellite program application and it's just the satellite school, then just give us the total number there. But if it's all satellites combined, along with the students at the Career Center and those teachers, we're looking for that total number. That is helping us look at the grant utilization and participation. We're also able to get that from some AET reports from how many students are actively participating in SAE. But this again is another point of data collection that's helping us identify ways to improve programming and supports to our local programs. The last item that you'll be reporting is item 6, and this is where the utilization of AET is extremely important for the students and teacher. So item A in the summary report for item 6 is the economic value report. This is based off of student record keeping. So again, this is only going to be as accurate as those student records indicate. And so you are going to run that as a calendar year of from 2019 to 2020. And so this provides us with that snapshot of looking at the entire fiscal year and where those students are at. Now, one of the difficulties with this report is we get that crossover between not started and not yet completed SAEs. And so we're trying to surface those numbers with the information we have. But again, you're going to lock that value report in for 2019-20 and generate that PDF to be submitted or to be used, sorry, to answer some questions in item 6. Item 6B is the teacher journal reports. The teacher journal reports, you're going to select a start date of the grant date of July 1, 2019, and the end date of June 30, 2020. You're going to select for all teachers that were named in the grant. So if you're a program that has multiple teachers, but only one teacher was in the grant, we only want to know the information of the teacher that was on the grant. So, but hopefully all teachers is what you'll be selecting there. The 2 activity types that we want you to report in the summary is SAE visit and SAE management. If you have logged teacher journal hours outside of these 2 types, and you believe they were actually part of the grant, you will need to adjust those journal entries and make sure that they do fit under the requirements of SAE visit and SAE management. These are hours in and outside of the contract day, but most the number we're most concerned with is the number of hours spent outside of the contract day in these 2 category areas to show how the grant dollars were utilized to extend programming to a 5th quarter of instruction. So the teacher journal report here, you'll see some screenshots just to give you an idea of the pieces that you're going to be selecting. Again, down here, there's a check mark box under SAE visits include student supervision details. Those are not required. One of the things that we would like to have in this report is not to have direct student information as far as names. So if you have names in your visit journals, we would like for you to redact those to the best of your ability or not utilize names in those visit comments just to ensure the identity and protection of the student. So here is a snapshot of some journal entries that we wanted to share with you that we feel like show a good example of what we hope to see in our journals. So you can see here that we have 4 journal entries, 3 of which are hours outside of the contract day and 1 that has hours inside the contract day. The hours inside the contract day would not go towards the grant utilization, but again, are related to SAE and working with students through a school farm or greenhouse or livestock operation. And so that is reflected there. If these hours were to fall outside of the contracted day, I would encourage you to edit this journal entry to reflect this as SAE management with the same description that is there in the school farm and livestock greenhouse, but to move it under the category that is funded by the grant. The SAE visits you can see are coming over from the SAE manager. So again, great way to do SAE visits and utilize that manager. It kicks over the report directly to you. You will see in the third one there, the evaluation and recommendations are blank. Tracy, I think, left that on purpose to see if I was paying attention, but we would like to see that information completed and filled in so that information is there. So again, we appreciate you taking a look at these recommendations. At the end of the day, it comes down to what is most manageable for you. With this grant, we have not been prescriptive in how much journal entering we see as far as the content. What we are looking at are the 4 areas on the right-hand side. We're looking at the hours in contract, the hours out of contract, the total number of miles traveled, and the number of students impacted by those activities. And so when you get to item 6 on the actual report, after pulling your teacher journal, we are going to ask you to combine all those numbers from those reports and report those total numbers that you found in AET by collecting those reports for in-contract hours, extended contract or out-of-contract hours, total miles traveled, and total number of students. Again, this is helping us understand how your district utilized the grant and how all participants across the state utilize the grant. And it also helps in any case where the legislature or Department of Education leadership have questions about the efficacy of the grant and how it is impacting our students. Using AET has given us great leverage in communicating how great our teachers and students are performing with their supervised agriculture experience. And so we want to continue to move forward and continue to have a great impact on our students. Any questions about the FY20 utilization report? It is very, very similar to previous years. We haven't changed much there, but open it up for any questions.
Ryan?
Yes.
My question is this only for summertime hours that we can use, or can we document all year long and put any hours in?
Nope, great question. So the purpose of the grant was to extend a 5th quarter of learning, and they looked at that as summer instruction. But we know that in order to operate SAE as a comprehensive program, it should not be limited to the summer. So SAE management and visits should be occurring year-round, especially when we have placement students who are working throughout 12 months of the year. And so you may use outside of contracted hours outside of summer months. We know that the majority of the hours are probably going to be spent during those summer months, but if it is beyond the contracted school day, then we do allow for the grant to be used to pay for those hours. Local districts may have different stipulations and local control over that. So we allow for the districts to do it, but it doesn't mean that your local district may choose to say, no, we're only going to pay you for the summer months. So again, it can be done, but again, we err to the side of the local district once we allocate the funds to them. Joanne Pfeiffer, thank you for asking your question through the chat function. The summary reports this year will be due Monday, July 6th. So you got that week after the end of the fiscal year to finalize those and submit those. All right. If you have questions on that, we'll just hold them to the end and we'll keep moving forward. So FY20 grant requirements. For those of you that are new to the grant and on this call for the first time, I want to highlight these check mark boxes that are actually in the application. These are the key factors, and if you cannot answer yes to all of them and check mark the box, your district would not be eligible for the grant. So a key component here are these requirements. So each district must complete a quality program standards instrument. It's available with advisory committee recommendations. And so that can be found on the Ag and Environmental Systems career field page. It's also part of our CTE quality program review system. So if your district has been a district that has found itself in compliance or non-compliance for a year or 2 years, this survey is the same survey in that compliance system. So if you've completed it there, you have it on record. But we encourage and require all of our applicants and awardees to be using the quality program review process and standards. Second thing, SAE Economic Impact Survey Summary that we just went through and how to generate that through AET. This again is your student records. That will be submitted following completion of the program. And so that's part of the grant utilization report. The grant requires that a licensed teacher will be hired or is hired for the instructional program. This licensure must be within the Ag and Environmental Systems career field. So you can't take an auto tech teacher or an English teacher and have them supervising SAE visits. That doesn't work for the grant. So again, please ensure that the teacher being funded by the grant is licensed in the Ag and Environmental Systems career field. Students are enrolled, will earn credit for their experience that leads to high school graduation. And so again, this is the integration of SAE into their coursework and your school's evaluation system. So for credit. So this is not necessarily saying that they have to earn additional credit to their course, but it should be a component of the credit earned through the course. The planned fifth quarter has been approved by the school district superintendent. This is kind of an easy one. They have to sign off on the grant application as the authorized representative. So that's a fairly easy box to check. The Career Tech program was in existence on the effective date of the legislation. So this means that you have an active CTE 26 within our system for the upcoming school year. And so most programs are good to go there. We will be checking that as we do annually, but we've not had any issues with that in the past. Grant funds will only be used to support the teacher's contract for extended programming. And all instructors will use AET Tracker for their student SAE record keeping system. And so this does require a district to be a subscriber of AET and use that for their student record keeping system to create consistency of those expectations across the grant. So the FY21 grant resources, it was in previous years, they were only available in the CCIP document library or the Comprehensive Continuous Improvement Plan library. We have now actually moved those documents out to make them more accessible. And so they now live in two places. They live on the Career Tech Agriculture and Environmental Systems webpage, and also in the CCIP document library. CCIP does require an OHID username and login and permission, and not always are teachers given those permissions by their districts, but the districts applying must have somebody assigned to those roles for the planning tool and funding application in CCIP. So I'm going to navigate through some hyperlinks here, so bear with me, but I want to take you so you can see where these things live in live format instead of screenshots. So we're going to give this a try. So the first one here is our Agriculture and Environmental Systems career field page. You can navigate to it by going to Topics, Career Tech, and then the first one on the top left will be the Agriculture and Environmental Systems web page. And down under Related Links, you will find recommendations for agriculture education programs. It's a great read on what is important for having an all-encompassing three-circle model, and our recommendations and guidance for extended programming. Underneath that will be the 5th quarter competitive grant announcement, and then the competitive grant guidance. I would recommend that you have the grant guidance up as you navigate through the application. It gives you some really good key questions to answer when you're looking at completing or responding to the questions in the grant, and it helps you navigate through each of the components to make sure that you have them all completed and up to date where they need to be. So here is where this lives on this live page here. And so the second one I want to take you to is actually where you would go if you have the OHID username and login. Again, the roles associated here are OED's roles are CCIP planning and CCIP funding. Those two roles are specific for each district. They're not limited just to this grant. It's to all of the comprehensive continuous improvement plan. And so a lot of districts may be hesitant, rightfully so, to give a lot of access to certain people. So this may be where, if you are a teacher and you're new and looking at the grant, you're going to need to work with those people within your district who have responsibility for the district's comprehensive continuous improvement plan. So I'm going to navigate over to this page and use my login to show you the access. So if you have an OHID username and access to CCIP, when you log in, you will see a dashboard similar to this that has your available applications. CCIP application is here, so you would select it. And once you're in here, you're going to see a few things on this left-hand side. The document library, draw your attention to. It does allow you to search for the Ag Ed 5th quarter documents, guidance. Again, they're posted to our Agriculture and Environmental Systems career field page, but you can also access them through the document library. Now, I've reached out to one of our grant recipients and asked them if I could show their grant application as a source document, and they have agreed. So I'm going to give you a quick tutorial of what you would see as a district filling out the application. So navigating CCIP, a lot of people I know can become frustrated with it, but it does follow in the guidance really well. So please have the guidance out and follow it. So we're going to take a look at an application from last year and show you what you would see as an applicant. So in the planning tool, on the left-hand side, you're going to see planning and funding. Those are the two areas that we're going to work with. I always encourage districts to start in the planning tool and then go to the funding application. So for this purpose, we're going to go to the planning tool, and we're going to be looking for current year. We would change this to 2021, and so we'll change it over. If there was not a current plan for the district available, there would be an item here that says make copy of 2020 plan. Now, I encourage districts to be careful on clicking that button until they know where they're at with the district implementation of the one plan. And as you can see, the one plan will somewhat replace some of the outdated components of CCIP and allow districts to do the local needs assessment that they've done for years in a different area, and it imports it into the one plan for CCIP. However, if your district has not yet joined the one plan submission and will be entering their comprehensive continuous improvement plan, then you can go ahead and make a copy of that plan for 2021. Again, if you are a teacher and you have access to this, note that you have far greater access than just the Ag Ed 5th quarter grant, and I ask you to work cautiously and carefully with your district to ensure that the plan gets submitted correctly and that there's no impact on any other grant applications within the system. So once you have 2021 completed and or implemented from the previous year, you're going to first start in the district plan, and then you're going to come back to the school building level plan. Again, if you have a high school or a middle school program, you would select that building based on where the teacher is located for the plan. If you have both a high school and a middle school program, you may actually choose to select and create two applications, one for each building. So first we'll start out in the district plan, and for this district, they have multiple goals in here that are related to their continuous improvement plan, but not specific to the Ag Ed 5th quarter. So districts can choose to implement and embed the 5th quarter grant goals and strategies into their plan, or they can create a separate goal that would be titled Ag Ed 5th quarter that would kind of bring it outside of the district's plan. Either way is acceptable, and what works best for your district and who is providing the information in the planning tool. This district embeds their programming for Ag Ed 5th quarter into their district-wide plan very nicely, I would add. And so we'll expand this out, and you will see that the goal here, it relates to supporting career education and development, and they have a few strategies here related to that goal that specifically call out SAEs. So you would create a goal, create a strategy. You'll notice under fiscal resources that they have a fiscal resource that is aligned to the Ag Ed 5th quarter grant. Notice they have budgeted the maximum allowable for the grant of $6,000 per instructor. But when you open up the strategy, then you'll create an additional action step. Notice here they've created multiple action steps. That's wonderful. It shows that they're fully embedding this into their comprehensive local needs assessment and plan. But the most important thing here is that the action steps have a grant relationship. This is the key component that a lot of applicants will give me an email or call me and say, hey, I can't get this thing to go through. A lot of times it's the addition of the action step and the creating of the grant relationship for the action steps that cause people to have a validation error when trying to submit the application. So once this is completed for the district level, you would go back to the planning tool, and this time you're going to select the building level plan. And the building level plan carries over a lot of the information from the district plan, but what doesn't always come over from the district plan will be the action steps. So you'll want to ensure that the action step is brought over. If it's not, you can just create the action step. It will have been saved from the district plan. So you'll click that in the drop-down menu and then ensure to create the grant relationship again with that action step at the building level as well. Now your district has, at this point, has a goal and strategy set up that has relationships with action steps that are related to the grant, and the grant has been identified as a fiscal resource for one of those strategies within your district's comprehensive continuous improvement plan. At that point, you can go to funding and funding applications. You're going to select the agriculture education 5th quarter application. Again, you want to make sure that it was 2021 for a new application. And in here, your application status will say draft started. So you'll want to click that to click for the draft to begin. Once the draft has begun, in order to access the actual application and budget, you're going to go down here and select the building level for which the application is related to. So this one here is related to their high school, and we're going to use the budget and application here to make the information available in the grant application. So again, in order to access the budget, it has to be at the building level, and or these boxes will all be grayed out. So from the budget standpoint, I should mention the budget can only be used for this grant for salaries and retirement fringe benefits. There is no indirect cost related to the grant that's allowable. So please, when adjusting the budget, look for salaries and benefits. The other piece to note here is that the grant, until the award is allocated, the budget is tentative. And once the award is allocated, your district will be asked to go back in and adjust the budget to match that award allocation in order to access the funds awarded. So again, this is a building level application, and so we need to change that drop down to building level. It pulls up the application. The application follows the guide document very well. The guide document also provides additional questions to help you answer the question or things to think about when answering the question. But you're going to identify the number of participants, the number of extended days that the participants have collectively, name the participant. If you do not yet know the name of the participant because it is a new hire, you may put in there new hire to be determined. And once that person's hired, you can add a comment in the comment log section of the grant that names the person or names the individual that will be receiving funds through the grant. Last part is the number of students impacted by the grant. And so again, this is all students enrolled in agriculture education courses at your district. And so you'll put that number there. Questions here, again, I won't go through each one, but you'll answer those. If you want to know that your planning tool is correctly set up, you can hit the expand all on the goal, strategy, and action steps, and you will see everything come over from your planning tool. I will caution you to make sure that once your grant is submitted, that nobody within the district changes the planning tool by deleting the action steps, goals, or strategies related to the grant application. We have had instances where people have deleted pieces of the plan, and that does not allow for us to flow funding. Something we can fix, but definitely is a little bit more work for people, and it does cause usually a great deal of panic or confusion. Last part on this, you'll see is that checklist that we went through earlier on the things that must be agreed to in order for the application to be successfully submitted. So once those questions are answered by the district and the budget is completed, the district will need to name a contact. This contact should be whoever has submitted the application in CCIP and has access to CCIP. Please do not put a teacher's name in there if they don't have access, because we utilize that contact to send any communications about the award allocation or any issues within the application. Once there are no validation error messages, so if you have an error in this validation column here on the right, it'll say message. If you have an error, just click on the word message and it'll take you to the error and describe how to correct it or what is causing the error to occur. Clean that up, and then once you have no messages in the validation column, under change status, you'll change that to draft completed. That'll go to your fiscal representative or your school treasurer. They will review and approve, and then it will go to your superintendent, who will authorize representative approve the application. Authorized representative approved applications must be submitted by the 22nd of June, so Monday, June 22nd. If an application is not in that status by that point, it will not be reviewed or will not be looked at for award allocation for the grant. So please make sure that your superintendent, you can do all the work, but if it sits out there and nobody has approved it, we will not be able to review the application. So be sure to have looked at it and made sure that all the appropriate people have signed off on the application. Once it says authorized representative approved prior to June 22nd, you are in contention, or your grant will be reviewed, and we will fund all eligible teachers with the grant. With that being said, a lot of people are like, well, the maximum allowable is 6,000 for the grant, but we never get 6,000. And that's because the pool of money that is set aside from the state biennium budget is currently divided amongst all eligible applicants evenly. And so each instructor will receive the same allocation across the state, divided by how many eligible applicants we have. So that is my quick tutorial on CCIP. I can also provide any additional help or guidance as people need. Some of us are very novice with CCIP and some are very experienced. So please don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. So the grant timeline, I know I talked about it a little bit throughout my portion of the webinar. The grant did open Monday, May 4th for applicants, and then it will close Monday, June 22nd. The grant utilization summary report that we outlined that you will receive this Friday is due back by Monday, July 6th. Please do not send it back to me until you've completed all of your SAE work for the summer, even if it is, or I guess through the fiscal year before the end of June 30. What we don't want to have is you send us information here in the next week and then continue to do visits, and we're not capturing all of the great work that you're doing. So please, if you have visits set up through the month of June, wait and send that report in there at the end. You can go ahead and start filling it out, but don't send it completed until you are done with SAE visits for that grant cycle. And then tentatively, we hope to have award allocations out for FY21 by Monday, July 20th. Again, your application will not be allocated funds if you do not submit a grant utilization summary report there by Monday, July 6th. So just kind of some things that work together for you.